Welcome to the Eck Media podcast. I am your host, Julia. I'm so excited this week to be hosting Allie Peck. She is not only a personal trainer, but she also is a horse trainer. So she's got a background in riding and training, and I'm really excited to have her on to talk a little bit more about equestrian fitness. So hi, Allie, welcome.
Hello. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Not too bad.
Great. Well, do you want to start by just telling our audience a little bit more about how you got into fitness? Like what led you down that path? Because
Yeah,
you've been a horse
absolutely.
person your whole life, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I've been a horse person my whole life. So like in terms of sports, when I was a kid, I mostly was just riding. Tried basketball, wasn't very good. When I got to high school, thought I would run cross country because it was just running, and that's super easy, right? Like there's nothing else involved. I was like, I can run. Being the hardest sport probably ever. But I did cross country, and then I ended up doing indoor track and then outdoor track. Cross country, I ended up just doing stay in shape for track. So I did that all 4 years of high school, and that I think just really got me into the habit of like exercising 6 days a week. Um, and so yeah, I just ran a lot. Was really mostly running, not a lot of strength training. But that's definitely what kind of got me going, got me into it. And then when I went to college, I kind of took a little break from running and slowly, I've done enough of that and started getting interested in strength training. I honestly started just like YouTube videos, kind of following people and just, I'm at the gym, pretty much just would work out and do homework. And that was about it. And then I just got really into it and found that, I had been an athlete all throughout high school, but then it wasn't really until I started strength training that I felt and saw like a difference in my body.
Hmm.
Felt like it just looked like stronger and I felt stronger, and just really, really enjoyed it. And then I ended up taking a prep class for personal training certification and then was like, hey, I was a personal trainer. So that's what I did over quarantine.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, from home. So I did the exam home, did all my studying at home, and now I'm actually using it. Now that we're out of COVID and all that.
So do you think that like it was something that you had wanted to pursue for a while? Because I know when I met you in I think 2021 and you were starting to train horses a little bit and you were doing the horse
Right.
thing, but it sounds like you were sort of thinking about this the whole time.
Yeah, I definitely in mind because like I said, everything was sort of uncertain. So like I graduated or I didn't have a graduation, but I graduated when I was at home but I had kind of purchased the course and like the exam before all that happened. So I was like thinking about it and graduating college and just kind of wanted to have my options. And like I said, I really enjoyed the strength training. So then yeah, once I was kind of at home, I was like, well, I'm gonna do this. And then I was kind of, didn't know what was gonna happen. And I met Caitlin and you. And horses have always been the number one thing, but then speaking to Caitlin too, she, we kind of talked about the rider fitness and kind of, the potential for that. So it's definitely been there. And now I've did the horse training very rigorously the last 3 years, like 8 horses a day some days. And so
It's a lot.
now, yeah. And honestly, for a little bit too. I mean, when I first moved to Pennsylvania, I didn't have a car. I lived in Caitlin's basement, and so I didn't have a gym. So like I was doing what I could, but I was also, horses like totally exhausted. So I would say, that kind of set to the side for a little bit. And now, been getting myself back into it. And obviously now personal training and just honestly feel a lot better internally. So
Yeah, I think that once people get into fitness, like it's something that can kind of scratch an itch that horses do. So it's sort of like
yeah.
another outlet. And I think a lot
Yes.
of times, I think horse people are terrible at this because we don't want to have to cross train because anything that's like
Right.
outside of horses, like just that doesn't sound fun. Like,
Right.
why would I do that
Yeah.
if I can be at the barn? But
Right.
how do you think that focusing on fitness, and I know you said you specifically like focus on strength training, how do you think that that's helped you as a rider?
Yeah, so I would say the strength training. I keep saying that it's like my favorite thing, and that's when I first kind of transitioned from running was what I was focusing on. But obviously now, I'm especially combining it with like the riding. It's more than strength. I would say that's like the last thing on the list when it comes to like rider fitness. It's more thinking about like core stability and kind of flexibility and mobility. So as a rider, I would say, I mean, I feel it. I would say I can tell when I'm not doing homework for what I should be doing because, for example, like I said, I over the summers riding, 6 horses, 8 horses a day, and you keep doing that, and then I'm not stretching, I'm not,
Mm.
and I'm like, oh man, my right hip starting to hurt because my horse is extremely wide, and if we're not very flexible, puts a lot of stress on the tendons, on the joints. So I would say the flexibility is probably the biggest thing, and the core stability, because when you think about, well, one, you're on a moving creature, so balance, but all the balance and the stability comes from the core first, and being able to, maintain your position while you put on all the different aids, while your horse is going whatever direction they're going, and especially training like young horses. I would say the biggest thing from the fitness aspect would be kind of the balance and body awareness and being able to connect your mind to certain muscles. So like being able to, half halt with your outright with your not your hand, but your tricep while you softly put a little inside leg on. So and being able to use, different sides of your body at the same time doing different things.
Yes. Oh my
Kind of a
gosh. That
loaded question.
so important for riders to be able to do that like that. And I love the distinction that you made, that it's not just about strength, that it's about that flexibility. And I think also, there's a lot of people coming into riding who are older riders that might not have ridden their entire lives. And that flexibility is so important to keep people riding for years to come. So I think that's a great distinction to make between strength and, flexibility. It's not all about just being stronger. And I think that's kind of a misconception that is often heard in, traditional riding
Yep.
instruction, that you hear a lot about, you just got to be stronger. And, I
You're
don't think
never
you're
gonna
ever
be
gonna,
stronger.
yeah, you're never gonna be stronger. So I think that's a really good distinction to make. But so I know you were saying about strength training, and we've talked a little bit about flexibility, but what sort of exercises do you feel like would be most beneficial for riders? And I think it's another thing to sort of think about there is, you mentioned about how tired you were after riding, 6 to 8 horses a day.
Yeah.
And we talked about how equestrians don't really love to cross train. So how can somebody
Yeah.
incorporate that into their schedule if they already feel like they're busy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, honestly, I think with anything, whether it's strength, whether it's flexibility, to make progress, it's real a kind of a minimum of doing something at least 3 times a week. It's consistency. It's like doesn't have to be a lot. Like whether it's, let's say you ride 3 times a week, and for every lesson you're, stretching right before you get on the horse. Or maybe you are doing a 30-minute workout where you're working a little bit like some balance exercises on the ground. You want to always think like when you're off the horse that you're on the horse, like doing things that kind of mimic, but like balance exercise, could even be standing on one leg. A lot of people are surprised if you try to stand on one leg,
Yeah.
how unbalanced you are. So if you think about that, you have a hard time even just standing on one leg, how hard it's going to be to stabilize yourself and also stay over your horse's center of gravity while they're moving. But honestly, I'd say if you had to focus on one thing, because I think it can be a lot to be like, oh, well, I'm just a mess again. Where to start? It takes so much time. Even just like 3 days a week, just starting with a little bit of core exercises, and stretching. And the stretching and the flexibility, unless you're going to do yoga, the yoga works because you are stretching, but you're also going through movements, and that's what
Mhm.
makes it stick, right? You're it's not strength, but you're going through movement, and that's going to make that pathway stronger when you're kind of in that more stretched out range of motion. So when it comes to riding, like if you have a 5 minute, 10-minute stretch routine that you do in the barn, before you get on the horse, stick a lot better versus, when we're at home and we're on the computer or whatever we're doing, like you can stretch because it feels good. But you go and you do your lunges and you do your side bends, and then you go back inside the computer, your muscles are just gonna go right back to where they were.
Yeah.
So if you do, like I said, have a little 5-minute stretch routine, open the hips, do the sides because making sure you're even. We are always crunching to one side. That's going to affect our horse. But really, I think focusing like stretching before you ride, and then even like I said, 3 days a week. If you're just doing like 15-minute core workout or something, it'll add up. It's really just being consistent and yeah, not trying to overwhelm yourself by thinking, oh, like where do I start? It's going to take so much time. I think just a little bit 3 times a week will add up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because I think so many people with fitness in general, not just equestrians, but
Oh yeah,
they think they should do the most right off the bat, like they have to do an
right.
hour a day or even 30 minutes a day, and that's just
Yeah.
overwhelming. So I
Oh
really
yeah.
like the suggestion of just like 15 minutes, just start
Yeah.
somewhere and just get
Right.
moving.
Yeah.
As far as body awareness, um, I know we talked about that being super important, but what sort of exercises do you recommend for writers or even students that you've worked with who have, you can tell, a lower sense of body awareness?
Yeah. So there's body awareness. I guess it's kind of two parts, like just proprioception, just like and balance, right? Being able to rebalance yourself when you lose it. So that can just be, like I said, when I say balance exercises, like simplest place to start is really like you stand on one leg. Let's say that's super easy. You can do that for 20 seconds. You're not wobbling. Maybe you stand on one leg and you raise the other leg, like a flamingo stand, it's called. Okay. That gets really easy. I don't know if ever anybody's, well, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the Bozu balls, right? Your balance
Yeah.
gets good, then you're right. Those things are very unstable. But if you just practice, like just standing there and finding your center of balance, like that, you can work up to that. Like there's so many things you can do from there. It's going to start by just being able to stand and not be wiggling all over the place. And then, people are you doing squats on them. So that's a big thing. And then outside of like the balance and that kind of proprioception, it's also, like I had said, being able to activate certain parts of your body purposefully. So it's like the mind to muscle connection. So like when I'm training people at the gym, I have a lot of kind of the same clientele, sort of, the middle aged people that are trying to get back into it, just like fitness and feel good. And
Hmm.
when I'm, even showing them machines, like, so you could have, a seated row machine, which is actually a great exercise for riders. Cause if you think about the same
Hmm.
kind of muscles
Yep.
you're engaging. So if you can do a
Contact.
seated,
Yeah.
yes. And if you can do a seated row, so with the seated row, like if time, let's say it's the first time you're doing it, you're gonna feel it in your arms. Like if I said, "Hey, where do you feel that?" You're gonna feel it in your arms. But then you look at the picture on the machine, it should be your
Hmm.
lats, right? And those, so I'm talking about this part of your lats. So when you're like half halting on a horse, it should come from your lats and the back of your arm, not arms, not your hands. So,
Yes.
and I feel like I'm getting off. I'm on track, but getting off
No,
track.
I love this.
No, but you
That's
know what I'm
perfect.
saying? It's
Yeah.
the mind to muscle connection. So like for me, it's taken practice, but I've been training for years and I love working out my back, which helps me. Like I could sit here and be like, oh, I'm gonna engage my left lat muscle. Where even my boyfriend, I was testing him last night. He couldn't do that. Okay, so I would say it's going back to it. It's self-awareness or body awareness. It's kind of the balance and that proprioception and being able to continuously like align your center of gravity, but then also being able to purposefully activate muscles. Because that's, I think, when we're riding and it's like, oh, but I am half halting or I am doing this,
Hmm.
but they're not doing it. So well, you're probably doing something else or not think you're using this, but you're really just pulling, with your hands or something like that. If that makes sense.
No, it does. I think that is something that a lot of writers struggle with, especially
Yes.
with like you don't have a full understanding of anatomy. And I've never taken like an anatomy and physiology
Yeah.
class, but I think just having this simple understanding of what you were just saying, what muscles to engage when you're doing
Right.
certain things like makes the world of difference. I was just thinking back to I took a lesson on Monday and I was
Yeah.
working on half halts. I was riding this little mare and she was just getting like a little quick.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about how I was riding the half halts and that it's completely coming from it should not
Right. The
ever be a
core and the
pull.
back. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
It's a real
yeah, I think just the simple understanding of how your body works and how the muscles can work together.
right.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I think the best example that many people would have experienced, like you said, is like I'm pulling and they won't slow down. Exactly. You're pulling and they're also pulling. So if again, when it comes from the body. So when I talk about back, like that's your core. Like, so when I think about core,
Yeah.
everyone thinks of your abs, right? Core is front and back. And so when that comes from your core, then you're just kind of holding the horse with your body and they're, not pulling. You're never going to out pull.
Yeah, and that I think brings us to a good misconception to talk about people thinking that you have to have like a strong core to be a good rider. Can you dispel that myth?
So I mean, when I say strong core, it's really a stable core. It's a strong, but not like, so in the core too, like it's not like your biceps, like that kind of strong. Like a strong core is a stable core. Like you can hold, like honestly, like if you're going to pick two core exercises, it'd be probably front planks and like dead bugs. I don't know if anybody knows. You can look
Oh,
it up.
yeah.
Dead bugs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love a
Those
good
would
dead
be,
bug. Those are,
yeah.
yeah.
So, but like when you think about like engaging your core, like the half alt, it's essentially the way you would engage your core to do a front plank. And
Yeah.
yeah, that is really the biggest thing about it. It does not need to be strong. It just needs to be. I mean, it's strong, but it's not in the sense of like not strong like bicep curls. It's strong like stable, and you can purposefully engage it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I like that
Yeah.
distinction between strong and stable. Because I
Right. You
think a
don't need to
lot,
do crunches. Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's a different kind of strength, I think.
right.
I wanted to, because just going back to flexibility. So I've
Yeah.
heard people talk about like dynamic versus static stretching. So
Yes.
when people are going out and stretching, what do you recommend, static or dynamic stretching? And can you kind of explain those two terms a
Yeah.
little bit?
Yeah. So I think honestly, you can do both, but for certain people, some works better. And I was just like talking to a client about this today. So like if you have really tight hamstrings, which a lot of people do, sometimes our muscles are so tight that when you go to hold a stretch for a prolonged period of time, your body's like, ow, and then it gets tighter. You create
Yeah.
more tension. So that's where like if you're experiencing like, you let's say, I don't know, put your leg up on the table and try to hold a straight leg hamstring stretch like that for 30 seconds. Okay, well, there should never be pain in stretching. There should be so if you feel pain, that means you need to do less. And that I think again with everything, it's like we always want to
Do the most.
like do it. I want to do the split now or whatever. But you just like that's how you're gonna hurt. You're gonna set yourself backwards. So okay, so dynamic when I know I'm going ahead of myself, but so static is holding a stretch. So a static stretch would be again, or if I do a calf stretch, right? Drop my heels on the stairs and I hold that for 30 to 90 seconds. I'm holding that stretch and then I'm releasing it. Or a dynamic stretch again would be more like walking lunges, right? Or I'm doing a walking kicks. I'm kicking my leg up. That's how I'm stretching. So there's more movement in it, but it can also even just be stretch for a period of time. So maybe you hold the stretch for 10 seconds and then release it for 5 seconds. And then you hold it again for 10 seconds. I think that's the biggest difference. I don't think there's necessarily wrong or right. I think you can do both, but you might find that one works better for you than the other, especially in certain places. I mean, maybe you're in your legs, they're not that tight, and you can just hold static stretches and it works really well. And then you have other parts where you're like, I'm so tight that trying to hold this is too much, and you need to do smaller intervals of it. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that totally
Yeah.
makes sense. So speaking of tight muscles, I feel like
Yeah.
this is one of the most common things that I've heard from riders, is having tight hips. So
Mhm.
when a rider has tight hips, what are some of what is something that you would prescribe for them, and what are
Yeah.
some tools that they could use to help them relieve that?
Yeah. So tight hips. So like when we think about tight hips, we think about there's the front of our hips and the side of our hips. I know those aren't technical terms, but um, so like when I say doing like a lunge, even just a static lunge, so you're down kneeling and you're kind of leaning into that hip and you feel it through the front of the leg and the hip. But then like when I had described earlier, getting that pain in the outside, like my hip flexors, my brain, my abductors. It's been a long day. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry, I'm giving you an anatomy test.
No, you're fine. I know that's so I know I can picture it. Doesn't mean I can name it right now. But when it comes to your hips, like is a big thing. So for example, too, depending on how your body is built and you ride, and so and that when it comes to like
Mhm.
position, you might be like, oh my gosh, like I'm always leaning forward. And I just like my instructors are like, get your like leg long, and I just can't. And you think, what is wrong with me? A lot of the time, it's nothing's wrong with you. It's just you have tight hips. So really kneeling lunges, like you can do the static. Again, if they're really, really tight, you might want to lean into it for a few seconds and then release it. There's also foam rolling, which is a whole other thing that's kind of hard to explain. You kind of have to show. Um, and then for like the outside of your hips, so like I have small hips and a wide horse. Okay, so that's when you think about it, like that's a lot of
A lot of
tension and
tension.
pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially I'm a dressage type rider, so trying to keep my leg long while keeping my legs wide. Um, so like for that part, you can do like the piriformis stretch. Or for me right now, like I'm actually so tight that just crossing my leg onto my other leg, I can feel the tension in the outside of my hip. So, and that's where, like, for me right now, if I was going to go stretch out, I would not, there's no way right now that I could pull my other leg. I don't know if that makes any sense. Piriformis stretch, look it up. There's no way I could actually put my hands down my leg and try to pull, just
Yeah.
crossing my leg over and just letting my hip open is tight. So that's where you would start. You would just like take a deep breath and hang out there. But I would say, yeah, doing like lunges and look up the piriformis stretch. And that would probably be like a good place to start. Again, doesn't need to be overcomplicated. You can pick two things to focus on and just do it consistently. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I love that. I think both of those stretches are really, really helpful and could be
Yeah.
game changers for people with tight
Yeah.
hips. So
Or
thank you.
pigeon pose if you're more flexible than me.
Pigeon pose is a good one, but it can be a little painful. No, well,
Can
it
be.
shouldn't
And
be painful, but
no, it shouldn't be painful. So if it's painful, then don't do it that far. And there's everything can be modified. And you also have to know there's people like I've always been a hypo like flexible person. Like I was never
Mhm.
naturally flexible. There are some people who are just naturally can put their like leg behind their head. Seriously, I've met people like that. And so, like I said, I'm a personal trainer and I ride all the time and back and but I stretch and then you get on and you just keep doing it. It doesn't, nothing. It's not like stretch, for 3 months
You're done.
again, right? Yeah, you're
Yeah.
you're just going to be starting all over. So it's consistent, but it's just actually I've said that 100 times. It's just being consistent.
And I really feel like that's the best advice is just even if it's for a few minutes a day, just being
Yeah,
as consistent as possible. And I think once people start to feel the benefits of it, like I know for myself, I try to stretch like 4 days a week, I would say. I need to be
because
better
you
about
run a
it.
lot, right?
I run a lot. So I
Yeah,
do get a little tight, especially in my back.
yeah,
But the difference that it made in my running in a really
right,
short period of time, like to me, I was like, well, I got to keep doing this,
right,
you know?
right.
Then life gets busy and it gets hard. But I
Yep.
think like once you start seeing like the small pieces of success with it, it's like a no brainer and people
Oh
just want to
yeah.
make time for it. So
Oh, absolutely. And even if you just look up like a 5-minute yoga video on YouTube, like that doesn't, like I said, doesn't have to be
yeah,
overcomplicated.
doesn't
Just
have to be
pick somewhere to
complicated.
start.
Yeah. I love that. That's the perfect advice. So I just want to end on sort of a fun question. What do you love most about horses?
That they see right through you. I think it's what I love and honestly that's not see right through you and just that they're just so aware and sensitive. And I think that's also what's kind of led me to want to balance it out and do that. Still train horses, but do it on a smaller scale just so I can just love it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Um, because I just like I said, doing what you love, but sometimes trying to do that, what I kind of found was it takes the love out of it a little bit, and then you just can't have that with the horses because you're stressed and you're annoyed and you're anxious, and then and I know too much now that I can see that they can see me, and I'm like, so that's what I love about them is that they just field, and then I mean some days you don't love it, but that is what I love.
I mean, I think they make you be so honest with yourself
Yes,
about where you are
exactly.
on a given day. And I
Yeah,
think, yeah, like you can go in expecting to do something and you come in flustered or something happens, something's out of the norm and like your whole day changes. So
right.
Um, yeah, they
And
definitely keep us
they're
honest,
just
don't they?
yeah, they're just mirrors. I saw some
Yeah.
quote in a bathroom at a bar the other day that said something. It was just like the horse will do one of two things, and it was what they think they're supposed to do, and like what you're accidentally telling them to do, or something
Oh,
like that.
that's
So like,
yeah. Especially lesson
so
horses, right?
yeah. Well, I don't know about grandma.
Sometimes they make up their own rules.
They definitely do. Staging
Most
is
of the
sensitive.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh. Well, thank you again, Allie, for being on. I so enjoyed talking with you. If someone's interested in working with you, how could they do that? I know you probably work primarily with in-person clients, but just let our audience know
Yeah.
how they could find you.
Yeah, and if they just want to like ask some questions or anything, they can honestly email is probably the best. So you can email me. It's all lowercase, afitrose97@gmail.com. Rose is my middle name. 97 was the year I was born. So that's where that came
I love that. Thanks so much,
from.
Allie.
No problem. Thank you.